Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be putting another motor in our budget Buick build. So tag along and see how it goes. So hopefully you've watched my other video on trying to get the Buick 350 running that was in this thing originally. If not, I'll throw a link up above so you can go and watch that now, and then please come back to this one. Anyways, I couldn't get that running. There was a bent push rod, stuck valve, and it just would have been too much trouble for me to try and get that running because it was an unknown motor to me anyways. I don't know the condition of it. So to spend a whole bunch of time on it didn't really make sense, especially being that this is a budget build, because I've already got another motor that can definitely go in this car. We just need to make a few modifications. So let me just show you again what that motor is. So here's the motor that's going to be going in this. This is a Buick 350. It's actually a 355 because it's bored 30 over. And obviously it's pink. So this motor I got off a buddy of mine and it runs amazing. It was in an 80 Malibu. The video is in the playlist with this of it running in the car. And it's an excellent running motor. I'm guessing somewhere north of 350 horsepower, probably closer to 400, just judging by the way that it screams. So this is a great motor and should do just fine in this car. So that's what's gonna go in it. I've also got a 700 R4, so that will give us overdrive in this car. Now the gear ratio in the rear end of this is a bit low, but it should be okay. If not, I will just go ahead and swap out the gears in the rear end. So this platform of this car is a GM A body, and all the A bodies are pretty much the same, and all the frames came with holes and mounts in them so that this frame could work for all the different cars. So your Pontiacs, your Oldsmobiles, your Chevys, and your Buicks, they all share the same frame, which means that all you have to do is swap the motor mounts out for that other motor that you want to put in here, and it's very easy to do. So all we have to do is get our Chevy frame mounts, which these are here, and they will mount into these 4 front holes. Now, I'm pretty sure, and yeah, these are the same for, so small block Chevy, big block Chevy. These are what you're gonna need to mount that in there. Obviously the ones that are there are Buick. And I guess maybe I could have just moved those and drilled some holes, but why bother? I mean, go with what works. Now, the confusing part for me was trying to find the right motor side mount that works with these. The traditional motor mount that you find that is regularly online, if you just type in Chevy motor mount, looks sort of the same, but the difference is the spacing in between here, and it doesn't fit in here. So I'll throw the part numbers of these down below just in case you're doing this project, just so you make sure that you get the right mounts for this. So this will go on the motor side, this will go on the frame, and be able to slam this motor in here quite easily. So let's get to pulling these mounts out and bolting our new ones in. So one trick I do when I'm inside the frame there, when you've got the bolt inside and your socket's on it, push it down into the socket as you start to take it off, and then you won't drop it when it comes out, and you won't drop it down in this frame section. I mean, you can kind of fish it out. Oh, there's some junk in there. so I could reuse the old bolts, but I went ahead and ordered new ones just to be safe. And they're grade 8 bolts, and they're the right stuff with lock nuts for them. So that's why I went ahead and just ordered up the bolts for it. I could have searched through my bolt bin, but anyways, it's just easier just to order those. So I'll go ahead now and slam these suckers in there. Let me put some washers on these. All right, so this side you saw was a bit of a struggle, but anyways, this side went all right. Got that hole drilled back out, and we should be good to go to throw the motor in this now. So we'll get the motor side mounts put on and bolt up the transmission to the motor. Now obviously, I mean, a lot of you guys are looking at this and going, but this motor's pink. So it's my wife's car, and she wanted it pink. And so I said I would paint it pink, so it's pink. And if you don't like it, too bad. So I ordered all these parts up from a place called Muscle Car Parts up here in Canada. And they've got a bunch of different sites. They've got a Camaro site, they've got a Chevy site, they've got a truck site, Corvette stuff. So they carry all the same brands pretty much as some of the bigger restoration shops down in the US, parts suppliers. So it's pretty easy to get the parts, and we don't have any duty fees up here, which is nice. Otherwise we got to pay duty, and the shipping is somewhat local shipping. They're out of Windsor, Ontario. Pretty easy to deal with. Website on some things isn't the greatest, but I will put the part number down below for these motor mounts on the motor side and the frame side. And these part numbers that I will put down there will be the universal part numbers, if you will, and they should work from your part suppliers wherever you happen to get them. But I also went ahead and ordered the motor side bolts to go with this, just to make stuff easy for me so I wasn't hunting around, and they were pretty cheap. So I had stripped this motor down and basically did a reseal on it, and it's always a good idea just to go ahead and check stuff on it. I use rubber valve cover gaskets. I use the rubber oil pan gasket, but it's a good idea, you know, if you've got the motor out, just go ahead and double check that things are tight. I can see this water neck might be weeping a little bit, so I'll just check my bolts on there. See, that was a bit loose. Sometimes things have a bit of a tendency to back off, I find, and so it's always good just to recheck it. So if you mess around with motors and stuff like I do regularly, it's always good to have a spare yoke on hand. Seems like I'm always messing around with 700 R4s or Turbo 350s, 4L60Es. They're all going to be the same yoke, so keep a spare yoke on hand so you can jam it in the back of the transmission when you're moving stuff around, and then it won't leak out the back of the tail shaft. All right, so there's our motor in here. So now I'm just gonna have to figure out the power steering pump. And I think if I switch that bracket around, it'll bring it up higher. I may need a different belt, most likely. And so that'll bring it around, but I'll probably need a different belt for this too when I put the regular alternator bracket on here. I mean, this worked, but in this car too, it's a bit higher. So I don't like that. It worked in the Malibu. It was in a 1980 Malibu, and that seemed to work. But well, like I said, flip that bracket around, and I think I'll be able to. It'll push it up a bit higher, which will make it work. All right. So now the next step that I have to do, I have to get this car up in the air because I have to put the transmission crossmember in, obviously, and I'll need to drill some new holes because this is a 700 R4. I don't think it's going to line up with any of the holes that were down there. Now, these Buicks, and I had forgotten about it, the transmission crossmember isn't drilled because it sits in rubber isolator brackets. So, I'll show you what I mean now. So the ends of this transmission crossmember aren't drilled because, like I said, it used to sit in a bracket. So now what I'll do is I'll just drill the holes in here. I'm going to try and see if I can line up any of the ones on the transmission mount, but we'll see how that works. All right, so we got our tranny mount in, and what's happening here is I think this side will line up and almost match up with some holes, but this side doesn't. So I think I can see that the frame is bent up a bit, and I think that's holding me up. Let me show you. So if you look down this frame, you can see it's just bent up over there for whatever reason. Maybe this car was lifted with a forklift at some point. Anyways, it's actually bent up a little bit on both sides. This side's not too bad. But what I'm going to do is I will pry that down and see if that gets me into somewhere so I can line up those holes. But these ones line up almost. So we'll see what happens. So because these tranny mounts sit in rubber, the ends get a little bit thin anyways. This one's not bad. This side's a little bit thinner. So here's what I'm gonna do. Now this thing, I guess the guy, buddy, whoever had this before, got it galvanized. I'm gonna try and grind some of this away. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a plate onto here, onto the end. And then basically we should be able to drop it down in there and mark the holes, pull it back out, drill a bunch of holes, and then we'll have basically the adjustability of it and make it fit a little better and be a little bit stronger. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm just gonna get a plate, find some plate, cut it up, and make this work. All right, so here's the cross member. I modified the ends on it, basically just lengthened them and strengthened it up, so I added that plate. So now I'll stick it back in there and mark the holes and drill the holes out. I had a feeling this might happen. A bit tricky to get in because I made it a bit longer. Just just a bit. Perfect. Well, that works. So do that. Alright, so I've got this drilled on both sides. So now I'll try and ram it back in there. Apparently I drilled the hole in. On both sides. Looks like I drilled a one hole in. Back to the drawing board. Okay, once more with feeling. Okay, good. That's done. That's officially installed. Perfect. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna quickly grab the drive shaft that I have for this car. I wanna see if it's gonna work. So let me go grab that. So this drive shaft is out of a Le Mans or GTO, and it was a big block car, and how I can tell is turbo 400 yoke on the end, and also the guy that got it from told me. Now this is not going to work. Shoot. Okay, so that means I need to figure out the length and get this thing shortened. So, which is definitely possible. All they do is they'll just cut probably the back one out, and they can re-weld the yoke on the end on, and balance it. So I'll measure this up and have to get it off to a drive shaft shop. Well, that's going to be it for today, and I hope this video helped you out if you're swapping in a small block Chevy and a 700 R4 into your A-body chassis. Super simple to do, off-the-shelf parts, and your training mount you probably won't even have to drill the holes for. So stay tuned for the next episode. I'm going to be throwing the drive shaft back in this, torque converter bolts, and hopefully getting this thing ready to run. Hey, and please hit that subscribe button, smash the like. I really appreciate all my followers all across it. I'm at Longspeed on Instagram, Longspeed Marine on Facebook. Thanks very much and take care.